afternoon and welcome to Indie Business Radio. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's show is brought to you by the Indie Beauty Network, helping you to launch, own, and manage a fun and profitable independent health and beauty business. Join us online at indiebeauty.com. Well, today, President Obama is coming down hard on American automakers who are floating in a sea of enormous debt brought about by current recession and, yes, also by years of mismanagement and passivity. Both Chrysler and General Motors are under pressure from the administration to come up with operational and restructuring plans that are worthy of even more infusions of taxpayer dollars, or they risk being cut off entirely and left to the forces of the market, which would surely mean bankruptcy for both of them. Of course, we all know that large corporations like GM and Chrysler, and even AIG, which has been in the news lately, have the federal government perhaps as a last-ditch cash cow if their business goes downhill. But what about indies? What about us? What do we do when everything goes south and we have no lines of credit, no cash reserves, and no clear vision of what will happen next? Well, one of the things we might do is turn to small business turnaround expert Marc Kramer. Marc is the president of Kramer Communications, specializing in internet strategic marketing, sales and communications, business plan development, and project management. He's also the author of Small Business Turnaround, Revitalizing Your Struggling or Stagnant Enterprise. And Marc joins us today from his offices near Philadelphia to share some tips directed specifically at indie business owners. Welcome to Indie Business Radio, Marc.
Well, thank you very much for having me today.
If you're listening to the show at indiebusinessradio.com, you can join the chat by clicking on the link there. If you're in the chat room already, welcome. Feel free to post your questions and comments for Marc, and you can also Twitter the show by following the instructions at the top of the page in the chat room, and feel free to share Marc's insights and tips with your Twitter family throughout the show using the hashtag #IndieRadio. Well, Marc, tell us a little bit about your journey to authoring this book. It has its roots, to some effect, in the auto industry, right?
Well, not really in the auto industry. I mean, we have done some work for automotive companies in terms of marketing, but really where it comes from is that I've run myself 4 companies that needed to be turned around. And while I was running these small companies, I had noticed that there were no books on how to turn around a small company. I think where you're talking about is that I referenced in my book that Lee Iacocca had written a very successful turnaround book in the 1980s, and it's very easy for a large company like Chrysler or GM to be able to lop off 20,000 employees, cut divisions, find places to cut that can lower their burn rate and eventually turn itself around if they have a good product or service. For the rest of us out there who might have anywhere from a few employees to maybe 25 to 50 employees, it makes it a lot harder because there are not that many areas that you can easily cut from that can reduce and increase the amount of cash that you have. And also, we're not going to get bailed out by the government, and there's not going to be a line of banks who are also going to provide us funding because we're so big that they can't afford for us to fail.
Well, and that is what I was talking about from the beginning of your book, where you talked about how larger companies have these resources, but then for small and indie business owners, we really have to be more creative than that.
You have to be more creative, and you have to be a lot more disciplined than those guys are. You know, for those guys, they're still flying in corporate jets. For the rest of us, we're trying to figure out how do we reduce all costs across the board, but at the same time not cut into muscle, which means not losing some of your best people or not being able to continue to put money into marketing and some other important things, product development, in order for you to continue to be successful.
Right. Now, Marc, your book is a real powerhouse of information for any business. And even before you get to information about how to revitalize a struggling or stagnant business, you also cover some really salient points and things that we can pinpoint in advance and preventive measures we can take. What are some of the indicators, Marc, of a business that may be heading for trouble that we can look at and sort of anticipate that we may be going in the wrong direction and try and stop the flow before it gets out of our control?
Well, there are a few things. One is that you're taking on business that you financially can't afford to support. So, for instance, one of the turnarounds that I ran, we were taking on very large companies where the margins were very thin, but the prestige of working with the companies was very high. And I rather work with companies that may not be prestigious, but where we had good, healthy margins in order to support the business. Another thing is that you have too much of your business with any one company. I don't sleep well at night knowing that more than 50% of my income comes from any one particular source. And I have a friend right now who's fixing his company, and he had 60% of his income coming from one very large global client. And that client ran into trouble, and the client froze everything. So right away, he ran into trouble and, in fact, has gone 3 months without taking a paycheck in order to keep his people supported. So I think when you take a look at your industry and you see that you're in a declining industry, let's face it, if you were selling to the automotive industry and you could see the problems occurring, you need to say to yourself, how do I start dialing down from that industry and find the industries that are going to be on the rise, which would be right now construction, still healthcare, education, which are going to continue to grow and prosper.
So, Mark, let's say you do have a business that's thriving and you are getting your income from more than one, or 50% of it from just one company. And in the case of our listeners, that might happen in a wholesale sense, where you wholesale your products to a variety of retail stores, but one of them is providing 50% or more of your monthly sales. What are some of the things that you can do to hold on to that customer and still, invest the resources that are needed to do that while also expanding so you don't get in this situation?
Well, really, it's a question of leveraging that customer. I mean, my father was in the same predicament back in the 60s. He was actually a wholesale distributor of drugs, aspirins and so forth, and he had a chain of stores that made up more than 50% of his company. And what I learned from his experience was that he had too many apples in that one basket, and instead of leveraging that name and going out and getting other companies that would give him the margins, leveraging that company as like the flagship, as the one that basically confirmed that he ran a good business, that they should do business with him. So that's what you really need to do, is that you need to take that 51% plus client who may be a well-known name and leverage it when you're going out in sales calls to get other people, so you can reduce that, maybe from 50% to 20-25% of your business. And you have to realize it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take time. So I don't think it's a question of will you lose that large client. I think the bigger question is, how do you leverage that large client to get a bunch of smaller clients that will take up that space? And in the event that large client disappears, the hit won't be so bad.
Now, Mark, we have a lot of listeners in our audience who are manufacturers of health and beauty products, and that's kind of where that wholesale retail question comes in. And, Mark, I noticed that a lot of them are presented with exclusive supplier relationships. That is a really good, solid opportunity from a retailer with more than one location or with a series of locations across the country comes along and says, we want to carry your line of products and we want an exclusive deal. Talk a little bit about what a very small business who could really use that level of a customer relationship in the short term anyway. Give us some ideas of what that business should consider before they take a deal like that on.
Well, there's a few things. One is, if you're dealing with a large company like that, they're going to really squeeze your margins. And so you have to decide, could you really financially afford to take a client like that on? I've known people who have decided not to take Walmart as a client because the margins were so thin they really couldn't afford to take them on. But let's say you do decide to take on that large elephant as a client. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you can handle the rollout and the number of stores that they might want to put you into. And just as soon as you get them as a client and you know from experience that you can deliver that product or service, immediately start leveraging that name to start filling in. And that way you can decide, do you want to go and stay with that particular large company? And let's face it, if you are doing business with CVS and CVS said they want exclusive rights so you don't have to compete against Rite Aid, you could write into your contract that yes, you'll give them the exclusive rights if you're comfortable with that because you want to get into that large store, but you want an out for the independent pharmacies and some of the other smaller businesses that would still take your product, but we're not a direct competitor to CVS. So you have to be a little bit creative, and you have to be able to, and you have to not be so concerned about losing that company. Because remember, that large company like CVS is really looking for products that will differentiate themselves from their competitors that will drive people into the store. And the other part is, one of the questions they're going to ask is, what kind of advertising marketing support are you going to give them? And you have to determine, can you afford to even provide that kind of marketing support or buy that slot in their store?
Right, really good
point.
So
even though it sounds great, it may not be the best.
John in the chat room echoes what you're saying. He's saying sometimes it's just best to give those white elephants to your competitors and let them have the problem.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because there's a lot of smaller guys who are looking to compete against the larger guys who think that your product would be much more meaningful to them than the larger company. I mean, I think it's always a problem when dealing with really large national companies is because they're trying to keep down their expenses, manage, increase their margins, and manage the stock analysts who are typically following them. And so you're the one that gets hurt the most when you put so much effort, time, and money into them.
Great. And John also has a suggestion to leverage your creativity and give exclusives maybe just for a specific product. That's another alternative. But, Mark, in today's economy, everybody is, for the most part, seeing some changes to how they have to do business. And so when we talk about, preventive measures in an otherwise normal economy, are there special things that we need to do in a recession to, maintain the status quo and continue to grow and expand in a contracting economy?
I'm sorry, repeat that. I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking. How do you keep the engine growing?
Well, in a recession, yes. I mean, the tips that you provided in terms of, not taking on, too much of your income opportunities from one source. I mean, those apply across the board. But what I'm asking about is right now we're in the middle of a recession. And so everybody is seeing things react differently from the way they would in a normal economy. What are some of the things that we can do in the midst of this recession so that we can continue to grow and expand our businesses when the overall economy is not doing that?
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to have shrinking margins yourself, because if you're trying to get people interested, you're going to end up lowering your prices for your product or service. I mean, I think that you're seeing that now. We have people who were charging us, coming to my house to go and put mulch out onto our yard, charging us about $300-400 more last year than they were this year because of the amount of competition. They know people have less and so forth. So you are going to take a hit to your margin. What I think you need to do is figure out what kind of services or product could you offer that would be a must-have at this particular time that people would absolutely pay for in order to have it. So, for instance, maybe if in fact you are running, a beauty salon, and you know that if you are having certain products for health and beauty that are still of quality but are much less cost, you'll be able to still drive people into your store in order to buy those things. But if you still try to maintain that high-cost fat margin product and don't vary the different offerings that you have to get people in and still continue to spend money, because let's face it, no matter what, women are still going to want to go and spend money on health and beauty aids. It's a question of how much money they still have to spend and what will they focus on. And so I think that's why you're seeing with the grocery store chains going more toward the private label, because they know people are going to buy certain things, but they know they want them at a reduced cost.
Well, and the grocery store chains, Mark, are an example of companies that don't seem to be lowering their other prices at all.
Well, you hear them. I actually follow the grocery industry a lot because I work with companies who sell to the grocery industry, and the grocery industry is feeling somewhat squeezed in the sense that the large, well-known branded companies who asked for these large price increases when commodities were higher, now the commodities have fallen, have not moved the price point down. And so they're losing business because customers are looking for going to the dollar store or wherever to buy certain products. So they're saying to themselves, look, unless you can lower your costs, then we're going to go to the same people those guys go to and have them private label cookies, sodas, aspirin, you name it, and we'll start offering them because our customer can't afford to pay those prices. Now, the grocery business is not a fat margin business. It's like a giant mall that these guys buy shelf space in, and if the shelf space doesn't see products fly off of it, then it makes it very difficult for them to stay in business. I mean, we've seen a lot of mergers with grocery stores because of that problem.
Yeah, I would imagine. And, of course, you know, there is a lot of talk about the drawbacks to actually lowering your prices in the midst of a recession. We're going to come back and ask Mark about that and also talk a little bit with Lisa in the chat room who has a question for you, Mark. This is Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. I'm here this afternoon with our guest, Marc Kramer, author of Small Business Turnaround, Revitalize Your Struggling or Stagnant Enterprise. And we've got lots of people in the chat room talking about some of the tips and ideas that Marc is sharing to make sure that our businesses kind of avoid this struggling or stagnant issue. And before we took our break, Marc, we were talking about the possibility of lowering some prices in order to kind of keep things going and keep things fresh and moving in the midst of a recession. So I wanted to get your comments, Marc, on commentators who say that lowering your prices during a recession is like the opposite of what you want to do. You want to maintain them or even raise them. Otherwise, people might get the wrong impression about the quality or value of your products. What do you say about that?
Well, I don't agree. I think that people feel that companies are out of tune and out of sync with their needs if, in fact, they keep the prices too high. I think that you're going to see a revolt in professional sports in the fact that the price of a ticket is so high that people can't afford to go and buy them. So basically, if in fact you're communicating to your client, to your customers and saying, we know everybody is in a lot of pain, what we're going to do is over this period of time until the economy gets back, we're going to give our clients a price break by lowering our prices. And we're going to suffer basically along with you. For us, it's hurtful to reduce it because it means we make less money, and it's harder for us to hire new people and support them. But we value you as a customer, and we want to make sure that you stay a customer. Because let's face it, if you don't do it, your competitor is going to do it, and over time, you just will find out you won't be in business. So obviously, you don't want to cut your price so low that you're losing money, or there's no point in being in business. Mm-hmm. So you have to take a look at how strong your margins are, and if they can handle that. If not, then you have to reevaluate whether you even stay in the business or maybe temporarily close it and come back in when the market changes.
Right, right. Now we have a question from Lisa Casper at BlueMoonCandles.com. She's in the chat room, and she wants to know what you think about streamlining her product line. She's a candle manufacturer, and she has about 600 fragrance options in her line, and she actually says yikes about that. What do you think about that, Mark? What are some of the things you would suggest for her?
Well, I actually ran into this once for one of the businesses I was running, and I said, look, let's do an analysis and find out, of our product line, and ours was like 25 different products, what's really driving most of our revenue? And, it was almost the 80-20 rule. 80% of our business was derived from 20% of our products. And you can afford to carry a large number of products when the market's really healthy and you're kind of experimenting, or the fact that you might have some big customers who want some of these other products that don't sell as much, but it keeps them happy and they're almost like loss leaders. But today, you don't have that. Wherewithal to stretch yourself like that, and so therefore you really need to go and say to yourself, okay, what products are a must-have that I have to offer in order for us to make our customers happy and stay in business? And so if she has 650 products and she basically finds out there's only 100 of them that really generate significant revenue for her, then she should probably downsize temporarily from 650 to 100. And what could also happen is there might be enough of an outcry for the ones that she does get rid of that will drive new business to her, and that could be a way of doing it. Remember, Coca-Cola originally got rid of the old Coke, brought in new Coke, and the outcry was so great that Coca-Cola was able to bring back old Coke. So I think that you have to take a look at it and say to yourself, what are the most important, which of these candles will sell the most, and keep those going forward just like you would in making a decision about what employees you need to keep, and those are the ones that are most productive.
Right, right. Really good advice. And Lisa in the chat room thanks you for that, too. So, Mark, one of the things that your book does especially well, and it does quite a few things well, but one of my favorites is because our audience today is independent business owners, very, very small, many of them with no employees, and the people that do work for us frequently are contractors and not employees for cost-saving measures. But one of the things your book talks about is ways to generate sales fast, and this applies whether you are a business in crisis or not. Some of the same things are the same. What are some of your suggestions for, really being able to roll up our sleeves and use technology to generate some sales quickly?
Well, there's a few things that you can do, and some of it's technology-based and some of it isn't. A few things I found that were really helpful. I was running a turnaround where we owed 63 different vendors money, and I wrote to the vendors about the products and services that we were offering and asked them if they had any companies that they might refer us to. And about a third of them ended up actually sending us business leads because it was in their best interest for them to get their money back to help us get more business. Most people overlook their vendors as a source of new revenue. The other thing that we also did was that we put a letter in every invoice that we mailed back a check to, letting them know about new products and services we're offering or about the existing line, and giving them a place to contact if they had a lead for us. And if they did, we'd also send them a gift for sending us the lead. And that went over huge. I was surprised at how many people did that. And I can't say I actually came up with that. The guy who was at our front desk, he came up with that idea, and he started sticking things in on his own. And we were wondering, why are our vendors calling us to send us business? And it was all because this guy took the initiative, put this information in each of the checks he was mailing out, and that helped us get new business. The other thing is, of course, there's low-cost ways of getting people to recognize you, and that's of course developing a blog. And if you can say something that is either deeply meaningful in terms of insights, if in fact you knew about different beauty products, especially ones that people hadn't heard of that you thought were valuable, you'll develop enough people that will come on that will want to follow whatever you have to say. I also love the e-newsletters as opposed to print paper newsletters because I think, one is paper is very expensive to do, both to print it and to mail it. where if you go to somewhere like Constant Contact and create your own online newsletter, you can do a variety of things with that and get them out there relatively inexpensively to do. I also think, and it's worked well for me, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, and that is write newspaper columns. In some cases, I've written free newspaper columns for weeklies and small-town dailies, just with the idea of building up my visibility. And you don't have to do it on an every week basis. If you could just get a once a month column, that would be fantastic in terms of building up your visibility and getting people to recognize you as an expert in whatever field you're in.
Mark, what's your recommendation on using a service such as something like sendoutcards.com, which kind of automates the thank you card process?
Well, I think it's good because you're touching people. I think clearly sending cards out with your own handwriting is even better. But I would have to say that, if you're pressed for time, the electronic version works nicely. But, so few of us get any meaningful mail anymore that if you do actually get something that's handwritten on the envelope, you're likely to open it. Just like faxing. Faxing is way underrated because how many of us are getting many faxes anymore? So when you do get a fax, you do read it. So sometimes you have to go counter-cyclical to what everybody else is doing because you want to be heard over the noise.
Really, really good points. What advice do you give your clients who are struggling for time to maintain a newsletter and a blog? I know you mentioned both of those a little bit ago, and I hear a lot of talk from people who are curious to know whether now that they have an easy-to-use option between a newsletter and a blog, that are discontinuing one or the other. What do you think about that? Do you think it's best to have both?
Well, first of all, I myself work a 6-day week, and I think if you parcel out your time in a smart way, I think you could probably balance both having a blog and having a newsletter. But if I had to make a choice, I would go with the newsletter, and I'll tell you why. The average blog is only read by 8 people, and your newsletter, if you have 100 to, in my case, I have about 10,000 people on my database, you can infinitely reach much more people through a newsletter than you can through a blog. And if you are going to do a blog, you get basically one shot with people, and that is you have to provide them with something meaningful, a real reason to want to read your blog. And so, there's a guy out in California who has, and I'm forgetting the name of the blog, but he talks about the latest new electronic gadgets. And this guy makes like $50,000 a month off his blog because he writes very strong, short-to-the-point critique about those new gadgets that come out. So if you wanted to know about the latest gadget, that's where you were going to go for that.
Right, and of course his blog is his business, so that's a little bit different. So you said the average blog is only read by 8 people. That's an interesting statistic. Where does that come from, Mark?
What is the name? What's the name of the blog service that covers all the Technocracy?
The Technocracy. That's really interesting, and of course, I guess we have to remember that there are millions and millions of blogs that people start that are probably included in that statistic that are not regularly maintained. That may throw it off. You think?
Well, no, I would probably agree with the statistic, and because if you talk to people that you know who have blogs, you're going to find it's a very small number of people that actually go read them. Because one is the older we get, the less amount of time we have. I'm 48 years old. I find it very hard to go and spend much time reading a blog because I have 2 teenage daughters, I'm married, and I have all my own sets of different things that I'm involved in. It's just like people with Facebook. You find the demographic for Facebook to either be really young or much older, but the people who are in mainstream working find it very difficult to actually spend the time on these technology instruments to be able to utilize them. So I think if you have a blog that is really you're thoughtful or it's irreverent, something that's going to grab a hook, great. I have a blog called stagesofbusiness.com where I interview CEOs of major companies and well-known entrepreneurs who have built their businesses. And I can tell you that I don't drive that many people to it, even though I have a big mailing list and people do like the blog. I mean, I've had magazines who want to take the blog and put the content in there. But basically, there's so many people screaming for your time that you only can get them for a very short period. So you really need to be able to say, what can I send them that's going to be really meaningful to them? And that's like statistics, surveys, top 10 tips, things along those lines.
Right.
It's got to be stuff that people would want to print out and keep.
Right. And that's interesting too. I'm going to have to check Technorati. I want to read about that survey that revealed that. I think that's really revealing. And I wonder if that report also, Mark, if you know, talked about the search engine optimization reasons to blog that may have nothing to do with how many readers you have, but how the search engines view the words that you're using and how they perhaps enhance your search engine rankings.
I also think search engine optimization, I don't know how much experience you've had with that, but doing search engine optimization, and we have lots of people that have come to us and say we'd like to have that done, they don't realize that your website doesn't quite read as smoothly once you do that, and there's so many people that also want to do the same thing in your space that it's very hard to grab mind share with people. And so I kind of think it's now one of those things that's being overused by people. I think, all these things are secondary to developing personal face-to-face relationships or online relationships where you're chatting with people. I mean, I think the fact that you've set up this chat room for people makes a much stronger connection than if you were just to write a blog about you interviewing me about this particular subject.
Well, I certainly agree with you on that. We have a lot of participation from the chat room, and it is a wonderful way for us to connect with each other on a weekly basis. We're going to take our final break and come back and talk more with Marc Kramer, author of Small Business Turnaround. And we're going to talk about what you just said, Mark, and that is the importance of staying in touch. You said face-to-face, in person, and online. We're going to talk about the significance of that when we come back. This is Indie Business Radio. I'm your host, Donna Maria. Don't touch that mouse.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning their new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're here this afternoon with lots and lots of fantastic listeners in the chat room, as well as our guest, Marc Kramer, author of Small Business Turnaround. Now, Mark, before we took our break, you were talking about the importance of personal communication, a personal one-on-one with people, both in person and online. Tell us what you mean about the importance of that.
Well, first of all, we're a society built on communication, and especially interpersonal communication. And not just our society, but around the world. You basically find, I do a lot of business outside the U.S., that people have to get to know people and trust them. 90% of anybody's sale is based on the relationship that they develop with someone, not so much the product or service they're selling, because let's face it, if you're a lawyer, there are plenty of people who can do the legal work that you're offering, but it's all about the relationship you have. Do people like you, trust you, feel comfortable with you? And then at the end of the day, that's why people write the check for whoever they're going to write to. And so if, in fact, they're from a distance, then if you're able to go online and do chat and use your computer's video capability, anything that's going to allow you to have that kind of one-on-one contact where they see you real time and talk to you is important. One of the things I do also is I send newspaper clippings, books, and other things to people that I think are substantive and meaningful to keep those relationships going.
So you by doing that, you sort of make a personal connection with them because they know that you've done that especially for them.
That's right. And I also make sure that I know about all my different clients' businesses, so I can make referrals to them. So if it's a two-way street, they know that not only are they paying you to do something for them, but you're also looking out for their best interest in terms of helping them find new business, new employees, new ways of reducing their costs. They know that you have their best interest in mind, and who doesn't want to continue to work with somebody like that?
Yeah, those are really good points. So Mark, how much do you use social media to do this? And by social media, I'm talking about things like Twitter and any social networks that you belong to. Do you find that utilizing those types of things can fit into your schedule? I know you're a husband, you're a dad, you have a thriving business. Do you fit those things in as well?
Well, I have to tell you, there's a couple things I live off of. My BlackBerry, like President Obama, I cannot do without my BlackBerry. And I have to say that that's the most important device that I own, because when I'm traveling, I can be really very far out in the country in Panama or some other countries, and having that capability is really important. I teach at the Wharton School of Business and also for the National University of Singapore. And for my students, everybody has a different way of communicating. You have to take a look at the generations that you're targeting your marketing to. And for my students, they were basically saying, why don't you have a Facebook? Because that's how we communicate. And so I created a Facebook, and now my students, even in past years, are all communicating to me not through my email, but through Facebook. So I think you have to take a look at your market and see what's the best way of communicating to them and what technology works best for them.
Good advice, Mark. There's no one-size-fits-all, is there?
No, but because, when you really talk to, let's say, somebody between 40 and 60, you're going to find that very few of those folks really use Facebook a lot if they're full-time, fully employed, and very busy people. Mm-hmm. I find a lot of at-home parents use Facebook because they have more time than the folks who are working a 50, 60-hour a week, which is almost a prerequisite for all of us in order to be able to survive in these tough economic times, and especially with the world being so globally competitive. Right.
So, Mark, we've had a great discussion about things we can do to keep things on track. Let's talk during our final segment about some things that we can do if, God forbid, things are just not on track and they've deteriorated to the point where even the things that you've suggested are probably not worth trying. The bottom's fallen out, in other words. What are some of the things that businesses in that position can do to turn things around?
Well, here's what I do when things are not going right for me is I like to go to conferences and hear what other people are doing. I like to go and walk around the mall and see what other businesses are doing. I like to go and read a variety of books, magazines, even magazines that don't relate to the industry I am in. I'm looking for new ideas that are going to reinvigorate my business, something that I can take away and say, you know what, if I implemented this idea, this might make a difference to me. And it might not be that idea that works, but that idea may lead to another idea. I think what happens is that people get stale and they keep, following, chasing their own tail and doing the same thing over and over again. What is it, insanity is that you keep doing the same thing over and over again. I think that failed businesses basically don't look out of the box and figure out how to cannibalize themselves, how to change themselves, make themselves more relevant. I mean, Toyota came from nothing over a period of time to surpass GM, and we all know that when we look at GM cars, we say, guys, these cars are dull and boring. I mean, the fact that they might cost $1,500 more than the Japanese car. Just nobody ever goes into a car lot saying, "Hey, I want you to know, I'm not willing to spend $1,500 more."
Mm-hmm.
You know, people look at what intrigues them, what they like. I mean, it's like Steve Jobs took Apple, which Microsoft had to bail out with $150 million, to where it now has no debt and $20 billion. And how did he do it? He did it through innovation. He innovated himself out of the problem. And just because you're running a beauty shop or a wholesale distribution business or you're cleaning offices doesn't mean that you can't come up with something that's different that no one's thought about before, either on a national basis or on a regional basis or a local basis, that you can go and implement that will make a change. I mean, how many of us ever thought about rolling suitcases? I mean, for hundreds of years, people were carrying suitcases by the handle. Mm-hmm. Now, how often do you ever see somebody doing that?
Right.
And I think that you have to go and take a step back and realize that things are always in a state of change, and that if you're changing along with them, that over time you're going to be successful. I can tell you I've reinvented myself at least 5-6 times during my professional career, and people say, geez, how do you manage to keep being successful, at a certain level? And I said, because I keep looking about how I should keep changing, because things are always in a constant state of change.
And so if you've gotten to the point where your business is not able to sustain that conference trip, and I know it's great to get some magazines and things. You can always get those locally, and certainly there's no shortage of ideas and information that we can all collect and try on for size on the Internet. But what sorts of options do you need to look at if you do have a corporate entity and you owe more money than you're bringing in? What are some of the things that you advise businesses in that position to do? I know your book talks a little bit about that.
First of all, when I've been through this before, I basically call all my vendors and tell them what my current situation is, and I basically tell them about what I think I can pay them and what the time period is. The biggest mistake you can make is not communicating with people you owe money to. Everybody has gone through some down cycle in their career. So as long as they know where you are and when they can expect to get some type of payment, people will stay with you. And in fact, people will go out of their way to help you. I mean, in all 4 turnarounds that I ran, not one time did my vendors ever sue us, threaten to take us to court, or pull out, because they felt that they were a partner with us. They felt that we were communicating to them and that we were being honest. I even opened up my books and told every vendor who wanted to come in and see our books that they could come in anytime, even unannounced, and I would break away and let them see the books. I would just leave them in the room with the books and let them take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that being honest and forthright and sticking to whatever schedule. I mean, I'm owed money now from a client, and they promised me, they said, we're going to send it to you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't get anything. Now, if they had called me at the end of 2 weeks and said, I know we were supposed to send this money, here's what's happened, I would be okay with it. But the fact is I had to keep chasing them.
Right.
That really, you lose all credibility.
Right. That makes it another job for you as well. So,
That's
Mark,
right. And you also have to make sure that you're not wasting time. Like in a turnaround, a lot of people start running in every direction without any focus. One of the things I would suggest to anybody is start typing on your computer a plan, see it in writing, and take a look and say to yourself, here's my list, all your attributes. Here's what you like to do. Here's what you're good at. Here's what clients like about you and about your product, your service. And then figure out what's the real demographic of who I should go after, because you can't go after anybody. I mean, I think a lot of times the people fail in anything in life is because they're not focused. They're too disparate in terms of all the things they're trying to tackle at one time. They get overwhelmed.
One of the really good themes, I think, in your book, Mark, has to do with surrounding yourself with what you call, your personal board of advisors. Can you talk a little bit about the value of that and how to assemble it?
Sure. Having an advisory board of clients, past clients, maybe your accountant, your lawyer, and your accountant lawyer letting them know up front that you're not going to pay them for them to be on the advisory board is really valuable, because you want people who will tell you what they think and the unvarnished truth. You want to be able to bounce things off of people. You want people who are also going to become advocates for you in the community. So, a lot of the businesses I ran, we would have anywhere from 10 to 15 advisory board members. And once those people put their name onto our website in terms of being listed as an advisory board member, they felt compelled to, one, hold my feet to the fire to make sure I was delivering the best product or service. Two is they wanted to tell everybody they were on an advisory board. Three, they wanted to help us generate business, because no one wants to be an advisory board where the business goes under. So you really got committed people that wanted to help you. And the board only works if, in fact, you're willing to listen to it. If you're not going to listen to that board and you're just doing it for show, which I had a client who did that, it's a total waste of everybody's time, and it will reflect negatively on you.
Now, what do you mean doing it for show? Somebody set it up just so they could have a page that said they had an advisory board and did what they wanted to do anyway?
They saw their competitor had it, so they said, I'm going to have an advisory board. And I said, well, what are you going to do with that advisory board? What's the purpose of it? What would you like them to help you with? I don't want them to do anything. I just need to have one because my competitor has one.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, yeah. I mean, what does that say about that person, and what does that say about the business's leadership and where that business is going? It's all negative.
Now, what do you think about tapping certain customers to sort of maybe not be a formal advisory board in the sense that you're talking about, but to sort of serve as your, I guess, your focus group, kind of, where you meet with them on a periodic basis and get their ideas?
I think that's great. I mean, it's always good to ask your customers what they think, and you're going to find that the vast majority won't tell you that because they're afraid of insulting you. They're afraid of bad feelings occurring. Some people are just uncomfortable, just like you have friends who are uncomfortable with telling you the truth about whatever might be going on. But there are a handful that will, and you'll know those clients because they're the ones who are the most outspoken. They're the ones who don't worry about what they're going to say, but they're interested in making sure that you're successful because their success depends on your success. Mm-hmm. And so you want to seek those people out and say to them, I wanted to get your input, because nobody will ever turn you down if you say to them, I would like to pick your brain. I'd like to get your input because I value your judgment and your opinion, and it would be really helpful to me in my business. If you could spend time with me and have a breakfast or a lunch. I typically always ask people for breakfast or lunch because I know they're going to eat a meal, and they appreciate the fact that I'm taking them out and asking them for their advice.
Right, and a meal is always a good incentive, too, I guess.
Yeah, I always think it is, and I don't like to take up people's time during the middle of the day because I know how busy they are, so I don't ask people to meet with them between, let's say 9 and 12 or 2 to 5 because I know they have their own internal meetings. They're working on projects or whatever they're doing. I basically know that, hey, breakfast or lunch, they're going to eat that, and if they don't have anybody they're eating breakfast or lunch with, then maybe I can grab them for that.
Right. Those are great tips. So there's an interesting thread in the chat room now. Everyone's commenting that, over the next 48 hours we'll all go to each other's websites and see advisory board pages. But, of course, we don't want to make the mistake that your client did and just throw it up there just for show.
Well, the other thing is, keep your advisory board, I would say no more than 5 people. I ran some bigger organizations where we had a real cross-section of people. But I would say if you're going to meet with them in person, have 5. If you want to do an online group, I would say you could do 10 to 20 people and do it on a quarterly basis. And if you were going to go and meet with people internally, if you're going through a rocky time, I would see if those people can meet with you once every 6 weeks to discuss things. And you have to share with them. You have to share financials. You have to share your concerns, your ideas, everything. You have to just totally open yourself up for everything.
It's almost like a mastermind group with a little bit of a different focus.
I suppose so. Yep.
Yeah, and those are, of course, always nice to do. Can you speak about that? Have you used mastermind groups to any benefit for yourself?
I haven't used mastermind groups, but I've been part of like CEO groups and or YPO and those types of organizations where people come up with great ideas, things you never see in your own business, just like you come up with ideas for their business they never see because they're so ingrained in their business and that they can't, I hate to use this term, it's so overused, but they can't see the forest through the trees.
Right.
And that's because all of us are so busy doing what we do every day that it's not obvious to us.
Right. Well, such great tips and insights from a seasoned business person. Marc Kramer, the author of Small Business Turnaround, Revitalize Your Struggling or Stagnant Enterprise. Thank you for joining us today on Indie Business Radio. Marc, where do we go to get more information about you, purchase your book, and maybe even check you out at a future speaking engagement?
Well, you can go to KramerCommunications.com, Kramer communications.com, which also has my books. I write a twice-a-week column for TheStreet.com, so if you just type in Marc, M-A-R-C, Kramer on TheStreet.com, you'll find my columns there. And also, I think your audience will be interested. My daughter, I have two daughters, one 18, one 15, my 15-year-old has her own mystery book publishing business that she sells mystery books for 5 to 10-year-olds all over the world, and it's called CookieDalmatian.com. And she decided when she was 11 she wanted to make her own money, and my wife and I are both in business. And so she said, hey, she'd rather have more control over her financial future by making her own money, and she didn't want to rely on us. So she does.
And that's good for her. We've typed that CookieDalmatian.com into the chat room there for everyone to check it out, whether you're live in the chat room or listening to the show later. And, Marc, you said you also teach at Wharton?
I do. I'm an instructor in the MBA program.
Great. Awesome. So
marketing, and Wharton's is a really fantastic, interesting school. I think any listener who's near a university should try to get involved in the university in some way because some of the best ideas are percolating there because they have like clean slates that they haven't seen things, so they don't let any obstacles bother them, that they're always trying new things and come up with new things.
Well, good point. I'm glad you pointed that out. We should all support and be a part of the local educational communities. Thanks so much, Marc, for joining us. I want you to join me next week, everyone, when my guest will be Sophronia Scott. She is the author of a fantastic book called Doing Business by the Book. If you need to write that book, if that book is in your head, Sophronia Scott's going to be here to tell you how to do it. That's next week, April 6th on Indie Business Radio. I'll see you then. In the meantime, enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.